The first time I saw her with him, it was at the annual summer picnic. Connie laughing, her hand resting casually on his arm as if it belonged. She caught my eye across the crowded park, and her smile, usually warm, hardened into something I'd never seen before, a silent promise of what was to come. The rain came down hard, a steady Midwestern sheet that blurred the edges of the driveway lights. It was late, past midnight, but the headlights of her car still glowed faintly through the downpour, pointing back toward the main road. Connie knelt on my porch, her knees pressed against the wet concrete, mascara streaks running black paths through the foundation on her cheeks. Her fingers clutched the doorframe, knuckles white, as if the wood itself might offer her some kind of anchor. Water slicked her hair to her face, plastering it against her temples. She wore the navy silk dress, the one she'd bought for the Petersons' anniversary dinner, expensive and clinging to her. Even soaked, it highlighted the curve of her hips, the line of her waist. 30 years had passed since we stood under Reverend Miller's watchful eye, and still she held on to a kind of beauty that could twist a man's gut. It made her kneeling there, sodden and broken, both worse and better. Worse because the image of her like this, a woman who had once moved through life with such effortless grace, felt like a judgment against me. Better because seeing her stripped bare of her usual composure felt like a perverse kind of balance. I opened the screen door just enough to hear her, the hinges groaning softly in the quiet night. She looked up, her eyes wide, glistening with tears and rainwater. I offered a slight smile then, just a small upturn of the corners of my mouth. Nothing more. It was enough to stop her mid-sob. Her mouth open, then closed, confusion clouding her face, mixing with the sorrow. She had come expecting anger, I knew, maybe even hatred. She had prepared herself for my fury, for accusations, for the raw wound of betrayal. But not this, not the quiet, almost gentle smile of a man who seemed to be observing a particularly intricate bug on the sidewalk. The old Gary, the one she married, would have been out there already. He would have pulled her inside, disregarding the wet, ignoring the hour. He would have held her, whispered reassurances, wiped the rain from her face, even if he knew her tears were not for him, not entirely. But that Gary was dead. He had been for a while now. She had killed him herself slowly, with a surgeon's precision, not with a single blow, but with 1,000 small cuts, each one a little deeper than the last. How, she finally managed, her voice hoarse, thin against the drumming rain. How did you become this man? The question hung in the humid air between us, heavy and dripping. I looked past her, into the dark, rain-swept yard, toward the oak tree by the fence line that had weathered so many storms. I considered her question, not as something I needed to answer aloud, but as a narrative idiom that had been building for years, waiting for its teller. It wasn't a pretty story, I knew, the journey from loving her completely to standing on my porch, smiling at her tears. But then again, the truth rarely is. I didn't answer her, not with words. The rain continued its relentless descent, washing over everything, cleansing nothing. It started, really, on a Tuesday, late autumn, when the leaves had just turned that brilliant, fleeting gold. I'd started planning our 30th anniversary weeks ahead of time, meticulous about the details. It felt like a milestone, something worth marking with more than just dinner at our usual spot. I wanted something memorable, a quiet affirmation of all those years. I'd called downtown, securing the private rooftop of the old city bistro, the one with the wrought iron railings and the view of the river. I'd coordinated with the manager, arranging for white roses on every table, strands of twinkling fairy lights woven through the overhead trellis. A string quartet, too, tucked away in the corner, ready to play some of the classical pieces she favored. I'd imagined the scene clearly, the soft light, the music, her smile. She was 45 minutes late. The city traffic, she explained as she finally slipped into the chair opposite Mimos, pulling the elegant black shawl from her shoulders. Her voice was a little breathy, her eyes glancing past me toward the cityscape. The excuse felt thin, like an old bedsheet worn too smooth. I'd already seen the sun dip below the skyline, taking the last of the golden hour with it. The carefully planned moment of twilight romance had passed, replaced by the deeper, less forgiving gloom of night. Throughout the appetizers, then the main course, she seemed distant, her focus elsewhere. Her eyes would dart, not to mine, but toward the side. Her hand beneath the table kept reaching for her purse, for her phone. I caught the brief glow of the screen more than once, shielded by her body. It was always a quick check, a furtive glance before she tucked it away again. She was present in body, but her mind was clearly somewhere else, conducting a silent conversation I wasn't privy to. I reached across the white linen tablecloth, intending to take her hand, to offer a quiet squeeze, a familiar gesture after 3 decades. My fingers brushed hers, and she flinched, pulling her hand back so quickly it was as if my touch had burned her. A small, almost imperceptible movement, but I felt it like a jolt. "Everything okay?" I asked, keeping my voice even, trying to smooth over the sudden awkwardness. The quartet played a soft Mozart piece in the background, making the question feel amplified, out of place. "Oh yes," she muttered, her eyes finally meeting mine, though only for a second. A faint flush crept up her neck, coloring her cheeks. "Just work stuff. You know how it is." I nodded, pretending to understand. Connie's interior design firm was her lifeblood. She put in long hours, traveled for clients. I'd always been proud of her ambition, her drive. She was a woman who made things happen. I told myself she was just tired, probably spent the day battling some impossible client or a delayed shipment. It was a convenient explanation, one I wanted to believe. The meticulously planned evening, however, never quite took off. The champagne, a vintage I'd specifically ordered, tasted bitter on my tongue. The expertly prepared duck, usually a favorite, felt like ash in my mouth. The twinkling lights above seemed to mock the dimness in my chest. The quiet hum of conversation from other tables, usually a comforting backdrop, seemed to isolate us, highlighting the growing silence between us. When dessert arrived, I pulled out the small velvet box from my jacket pocket, a diamond tennis bracelet, a string of perfect, glittering stones. I'd chosen it for its classic elegance, a timeless piece, like I hoped our marriage was. "Happy anniversary, Connie," I said, pushing the box across the table. She opened it, her gaze lingering on the diamonds for only a moment, a cursory glance before she gently closed the lid and set the box beside her plate, almost dismissively. There was no gasp, no immediate attempt to put it on, just a polite, "It's lovely, Gary, thank you." Her voice lacked its usual warmth, like a lamp with a failing bulb. Looking back, knowing what I know now, I sometimes wonder if she was already wearing something from him that night. Something less ostentatious, perhaps. Something that didn't demand attention, but whispered its presence against her skin. It was late when we finally got home, the silence in the car heavy and suffocating. Connie went straight to the master bathroom, the sound of the shower starting up a few minutes later, the steady drumming of water against tile. I stood in the hallway listening. That pit in my stomach, the one that had started to form when she was late for dinner, had grown into something vast and aching. The questions, small at first, now pounded in my head, too persistent to ignore. I walked into the bedroom, the room we had shared for 3 decades, and saw her phone on the nightstand, its screen dark. I'd never touched her phone before, never even considered it. But that night, it felt like the only path left open to me. My hand felt alien as I picked it up. Her passcode was simple, our anniversary date. It unlocked the screen, revealing a dozen notifications, mostly from social media. But then I saw it, at the top of her messages, a string of texts to someone saved simply as M. My thumb, suddenly clumsy, tapped the thread open. The words hit me like a physical blow, each one a sharp, precise cut. "Last night was incredible, still feeling you on my skin." Another, timestamp from an evening I'd worked late, read, "He's working late again. Come over, I need you." The raw, unfiltered intimacy of it made my breath catch in my throat. My hand began to tremble, so violently that the phone nearly slipped from my grasp. I gripped it tighter, my knuckles white. I scrolled down past more messages, the dates stretching back weeks, then months. Each text a fresh wound. Photos, some blurry, some disturbingly clear. Videos, short clips of laughter, of whispers, of things I couldn't bring myself to watch fully. The timestamps painted a clear, brutal timeline, a parallel life she'd been living right under my nose. The anniversary dinner, the empty promises, the dismissive glance at the bracelet, it all clicked into place. Not as distant behavior, but as part of this ongoing, elaborate deception. The betrayal wasn't just the affair itself, not just the physical act. It was the way she talked about me, the way she dismissed me, dissected me for this other man. "He's so boring," one message read, from a night I'd stayed up trying to fix the leaky faucet in the kitchen. "All he cares about is his damn garden and his paperwork." And then, the cruelest cut of all, "You're twice the man he'll ever be." The words hung in the air, echoing in my mind, stripping away every ounce of my self-worth. It was as if she had taken a knife to the very core of who I was, leaving me hollowed out, empty. I sank onto the edge of the bed, the mattress sinking beneath my weight. The expensive quilt, a gift from her sister, felt like a shroud. My entire world, the solid, dependable foundation I'd built over 3 decades, crumbled around me. The walls of our bedroom, which had always felt like a sanctuary, now seemed to mock me, enclosing me in this fresh hell. A sick, morbid part of me kept scrolling, drawn in by the gruesome details, torturing myself with every new revelation. Each photo, each word, twisting the knife deeper. I needed to know, needed to understand the full scope of her deceit. I needed to put a face to M. I kept scrolling, my eyes burning, until I found it. A contact card, tucked away, but unmistakably clear. Chad Miller, my neighbor. The personal trainer I had hired 6 months prior, the one I'd paid good money to help me get back in shape. The one who had come to our house 3 times a week, chatting amiably with both of us, laughing at my jokes, offering tips on my grip. Chad. The irony of it all hit me with a nauseating thud. I had hired Chad Miller, our grinning, muscle-bound neighbor, a man 10 years my junior, to help me get back into shape. Not just for my health, though that was part of it, but because I'd hoped it would rekindle something between Connie and me. I wanted to be the man she'd married, the man who could still surprise her. I remembered her words, delivered with a soft smile. "You work so hard, honey. You deserve to take care of yourself. Why don't you try Chad? He's supposed to be very good." The memory, once warm, now burned like acid in my gut. All the pieces, once scattered and seemingly unconnected, now snapped into place with chilling precision. Her sudden, almost aggressive interest in fitness. The new, expensive workout clothes she'd bought. Bright colors she never used to wear. The green health smoothies she'd started making every morning, urging me to try one, claiming they were for vitality. Even her suggestion, repeated more than once, that we have Chad and his girlfriend over for dinner. I'd always thought it was her way of being friendly, of expanding our social circle. Now I saw it for what it was, a calculated move, a way to normalize his presence in our home, to parade her deception right in front of me. I didn't sleep that night. I moved from the bed, where her scent still lingered on the pillows, to my home office. The room felt cold, sterile. I poured myself a generous measure of scotch, the amber liquid burning as it went down, and set about unraveling the rest of it. Credit card statements, old phone records from our shared account, archived emails. I was no detective, but the digital breadcrumbs she'd left were glaring. A hotel charge in Milwaukee from a weekend she'd claimed to be at a design conference. A string of late-night calls to an unfamiliar number. Chad's second, private line, I realized with a fresh wave of nausea. The picture that emerged, painstakingly constructed over the long, dark hours, was worse than I could have ever imagined. It wasn't a lapse in judgment, not a moment of weakness. It was a calculated, deliberate plan, slowly, methodically dismantling the life we'd built together. The morning light, when it finally crept through the blinds, felt harsh and unforgiving. Connie walked into the kitchen, dressed in her usual crisp work clothes, smelling of coffee and expensive perfume. She moved with her accustomed efficiency, pulling out the coffee mugs, reaching for the toaster. I stood by the island, the empty Scotch glass still in my hand. "Well," she said without looking at me, her voice as casual as if she were commenting on the weather. "It finally got through to you, did it?" Her calm, her complete lack of surprise, struck me harder than any scream or tear could have. It was as if she had been waiting for this moment, rehearsed for it, There was no denial, no attempt to lie. Yes, she continued, turning to face me then, her expression unreadable. I have someone else, and he's better than you in every way. My voice, when I finally found it, came out rough, scraped raw from the night's revelations. 30 years, Connie. 30 goddamn years. Why? The words were tight, forced through a constricted throat. I gripped the glass, wanting to hurl it against the wall, but my hand felt rooted to the spot. She laughed then. It wasn't a warm laugh or even a cruel one. It was a brittle, almost brittle sound, like glass breaking underfoot. Because you're boring, Gary, she said, shrugging her shoulders. You're predictable. When was the last time you surprised me? When was the last time you made me feel alive? Her eyes, usually so expressive, were cold, devoid of any genuine emotion. They were the eyes of a stranger, looking at a stranger. I worked, I shouted, my voice cracking, feeling the raw edge of betrayal. I worked to give you everything you wanted. This house, the trips, your firm, everything. My arms swept out, encompassing the kitchen, the visible corners of the life we'd built. Connie met my outburst with a dismissive wave of her hand. Things, Gary. You gave me things. What about passion? What about excitement? Do you even remember what those words mean anymore? Her voice held a sharp, derisive edge, each word a finely honed blade. She leaned against the counter, casual, as if discussing a trivial matter. She claimed Chad made her feel young again, desired in a way she hadn't been in years. The words hung in the air, thick with implied comparisons, each one a twist of the knife. Then came the final blow, delivered with a smirk that felt colder than any ice. Someone who doesn't need to pop a little blue pill to get things started. The jab landed squarely, hitting a vulnerability I hadn't known she even perceived, let alone would exploit. My recent struggles, a quiet, embarrassing battle I'd kept mostly to myself, now weaponized and thrown back in my face. The air left my lungs in a ragged gasp. So all these years, I managed, my voice barely a whisper, all these years meant nothing to you? She shrugged, a small, elegant movement of her shoulders. It was convenient. You were convenient. But I'm done settling. The word settling tasted like poison in my mouth. 30 years, a lifetime shared, reduced to a matter of convenience. A temporary arrangement until something better came along. The anger, momentarily dulled by the shock, flared again, hot and blinding. You built this life for you, she continued, her voice dripping with condescension. Your perfect little picture of a suburban existence. You just assumed your perfect wife would always be there, a fixture in your boring, predictable world. She pushed off the counter then, taking a slow step toward me, her eyes locked on mine. Her movement was deliberate, almost sensual, a calculated performance. She leaned in close, her breath warm against my ear, and purred. Chad makes love to me fiercely, Gary. He makes me scream and beg. Can you say the same? A wave of nausea washed over me. The image she conjured, the words she used, were meant to obliterate me, to leave me a hollowed-out shell. I recoiled, physically stepping back, as if her proximity itself carried a contagion. Get out, I whispered, the words choked and raw. She straightened up, a triumphant smirk playing on her lips. Gladly, my lawyer will be in touch. And just like that, it was over. She left that afternoon. I watched from the living room window as her car, packed with bags and boxes, pulled out of the driveway. She took half of everything we had built, not just the physical objects, but the shared memories, the future we'd once envisioned. The house, once full of her presence, now felt like a mausoleum, vast and empty. That first night alone, with the echoes of her cutting words still ringing in my ears, I got completely, utterly drunk. A man makes choices, some easy, some hard, some costly. Stick around to the end to see how life's costly choices unfold. The divorce proceedings were brutal, just as Connie had promised. Her lawyer, a sharp woman named Ms. Henderson, was a shark tearing through 30 years of our shared life with clinical precision. It became painfully clear that Connie hadn't just decided to leave. She had meticulously planned for it, gathering her evidence, setting her traps for months, perhaps even a year. Every joint account, Every asset, every piece of property was scrutinized, weighed, and then carved up by the impersonal hand of equitable distribution. It felt like watching a surgeon dissect a living thing, my history, my future laid bare and parceled out. The weight of it pressed down on me, heavy and suffocating. I moved out of the family home, the one we had built together, the one filled with so many ghosts. The new place was smaller, a quiet house on the edge of town, with a modest garden I could tend. It was a fresh start, I told myself, a necessary escape from the haunting memories that clung to every corner of the old house, every familiar scent. My close friends, the few who stuck around, offered quiet support. My sister called weekly, never pressing, just checking in. The wound of betrayal was deep, a constant ache, but their steady presence was a balm. Slowly, carefully, I began to rebuild. I found solace in simple routines: morning coffee on the porch, long walks by the creek, the quiet rhythm of weeding my new flower beds. I rediscovered old hobbies I'd long neglected. My woodworking tools, gathering dust in the garage, now saw new life, crafting simple shelves, small repairs. It was mundane, but in the mundane I found a steadying force. I worked on myself, not just physically with my walks, but mentally. I read more, spent quiet evenings listening to the radio, piecing together the fragments of the man I used to be, the identity that had been so tangled with hers. Over the course of a year, the acute pain dulled into a more manageable ache. It was still there, a scar tissue forming, but it no longer consumed me. I learned to live with it, to carry it, to grow stronger and more self-reliant around it. The silence in the house, once deafening, slowly transformed into a quiet companion. Then the whispers started, small at first, carried on the polite breeze of neighborhood gossip, then growing louder, more persistent. Connie's new life with Chad, it seemed, wasn't the fairy tale she had so confidently described. Stories began to surface about Chad's true colors: his financial irresponsibility, his penchant for living beyond his means, his quick temper when things didn't go his way. The whispers hinted at arguments, at a relationship that was far from stable, far from the excitement she had craved. I heard she'd had to sell some of the pieces she'd taken from our house just to cover his debts. I didn't seek out these stories, but they found their way to me, carried by well-meaning friends or through overheard conversations at the grocery store. I felt no joy in them, no satisfaction, just a quiet, unexpected peace in my solitude. A sense of quiet triumph, not in her misfortune, but in my own survival. The news came to me in fragments, carried by the usual channels of small-town life. Chad had left Connie, not with a dramatic confrontation, but quietly, slipping away, leaving behind a stack of unpaid bills and a trail of broken promises. It happened just as my own life had begun to stabilize, the rough edges of the divorce slowly smoothing out, my new routines taking hold. The timing felt almost deliberate, a cosmic counterpoint to my slow climb back to solid ground. Connie, accustomed to a certain lifestyle, found herself struggling. The interior design firm, already suffering from her distracted leadership and a growing reputation for unreliability, faltered. Her financial situation, exacerbated by Chad's profligacy, spiraled. She'd burned bridges with many of her old friends during the affair, alienating them with her self-absorption and later her increasingly erratic behavior. She tried to reach out to old acquaintances, a few shared friends reported, but found doors closed, hands unwilling to reach back. People, it seemed, had chosen sides, quietly but firmly. I started receiving vague, sometimes pleading text messages and voicemails. They spoke of loneliness, of mistakes, of a desire to talk things over. I ignored them all. Each message, each unanswered call, was a testament to the new man I had become. The old Gary, the one who would have rushed to her side, was gone. He had been replaced by someone detached, someone who understood the precise weight of a closed door. Occasionally, I'd see her in town at the grocery store or driving down Main Street. She looked thinner, her expensive clothes hanging a little looser. Her face, usually so composed, seemed worn, etched with a quiet desperation. She was a shadow of the confident woman who had once breezed through our life. A major storm had been brewing all day, the sky turning a bruised purple gray. Now, in the late hours, it rolled in, mirroring the emotional turmoil of the past year and perhaps the one to come. Rain lashed against the windows of my smaller house, the wind whistling a low, mournful tune through the eaves. I sat in my armchair, a book open on my lap, but my gaze was fixed on the shifting patterns of rain on the glass. I thought about the man I'd been, and the man I was now. Resilient, yes. Detached, certainly. Detached. Changed. Irrevocably. The bitterness still lingered, a taste on my tongue, but it was tempered by a strange, quiet sense of fortitude. I had weathered the storm she brought, and I had survived. An insistent knocking rattled my front door, cutting through the rhythmic sound of the rain. It wasn't the tentative knock of a neighbor, but something desperate, urgent. I pushed myself up, walked to the door, and looked through the peephole. The figure on my porch was unmistakable. I took a breath, then opened the door. Connie knelt there just as she had a year ago, rain-soaked, her navy dress plastered to her still perfect figure. Mascara-stained tears streamed down her face, clinging to the doorframe as if it were the last stable thing in her world. She looked up at me, her eyes wide, full of a familiar confusion and a fresh, deeper desperation. And on my face, the same unexpected smile played. The one she'd seen before, the quiet, almost gentle smile of a man who had finally, truly, seen the full, bitter yield of her choices. The rain continued, a steady curtain falling between us and the world. Connie knelt, her face a map of ruin, a stark contrast to the perfect image she'd always presented. I didn't reach for her. There was no impulse to pull her in, no lingering flicker of the old devotion. The smile on my face wasn't one of joy or even malice, but a quiet recognition. It was the smile of a man who had seen a cycle complete itself, a prophecy fulfilled. She was still young enough, I thought, to rebuild, to find another path. But that wasn't my concern anymore. My own path, forged through the wreckage she'd left, was now clear and steady. The house was quiet, the garden growing, my books read. I had paid my price, and now it seemed she was paying hers. The cold night air, mixed with the scent of damp earth and her perfume, offered no absolution. Just the simple, undeniable truth of what had been and what now was.